Alright everybody, we're back and we have so far picked out our reference image and we have applied it to a plane in Maya so that we can use it as reference for our modeling. We're going to be modeling this little sniper rifle here, and so I guess the next step is just to go ahead and get started. So I guess there's a couple of things to go over here. First, you can see my image quality is a little pixelated, even though we chose a nice high resolution image. And this isn't terrible quality here. I would typically work from this quality. Yours might be a lot worse than this. So if you're getting like a really kind of pixelated, blocky, low resolution image, you might have to up your settings. So in order to do that, you'll go up here to Window, Settings and Preferences, and click Preferences, and then I believe it's under Display. Yeah, okay, so Display, and then we have a couple of settings over here under Performance. Max Texture Display Resolution. So I have this set to 4096, which is good. That's fine. That's saying that it can show me a texture resolution of 4096, which is plenty high. But then we also have Baked Viewport Textures. And you can see mine set right up here about 3/4 of the way up to high quality. Now by default, I believe this is set way lower. And if I set it up higher, it kind of ticks along. If I set it up higher, I can get a higher quality. So I'll hit save there. You know, I'll do that and then I'll hit save. But you want it kind of high, and then you may have to actually reload your texture on the plane. So you just go back to your texture in the attribute editor here, and you hit reload, and see how it's just gotten crisper now because it's loaded it in at a nicer resolution. It's not so pixelated now, and it gives us just sharper lines to work from, more detail. It makes it a little bit easier when we're modeling. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it with those settings. I like that. But that's just a little note if you're having trouble with your image being real low resolution. So the next step, don't forget to turn this back to a reference. There we go. Okay. So the next step is basically going to be to model the weapon. Now there's several ways to go about doing this. I use generally a technique called box modeling. I'm sure you've probably heard of it, where basically we just start with a box and we add more geometry and get things going. It's important that you start with large, broad shapes. You know, don't worry about every little screw, all these little details right off the bat. That's just going to drive you insane, and it's going to end up making your results probably pretty poor. So what I generally try and do is I pick a large section that I want to work on, and you're going to kind of break down things into individual pieces. Don't think that it has to be all one part. I'm not going to model the barrel and the scope as one piece. That would be kind of ridiculous, and it would be too hard to do. So we'll just start with this basic green part here, the stock, and we'll kind of work that shape out, and I think we'll get that going pretty good before we move on to any other details. So I'm in my front view. This is my orthogonal view, and I'm going to start by just making a box. So I'll just click and put a box here. I'm going to zero it out just to make sure that it's all good to go there. Now, immediately you can see there's kind of a problem here. I can't see through the box. You know, how am I going to reference this shape if I can't see through the box? So you just go up here, and there's this little kind of gray box, and that says X-ray. That's X-ray mode. And when I click that, you can see how everything kind of grays out, and now I can see through my box. Now some people prefer to reference their image through the plane, through the camera, so that they can have this background reference image not gray out. I just don't work that way. You can do it that way if you want to, but I'm not going to go over how to do it in this particular tutorial, because that's not how I generally work. But if you get in close here, which is what you're going to want to do anyway, you can see the image fine, and you can see our box here. So I'm moving it over to this edge, and what I'm going to start doing is I'm just going to block out the shape. So I'm going into vertex mode here and moving these over. You can do some extrusions or whatever you want to do. I'm going to come to about here with it, I think, for now, and then we'll worry about back there a little bit later. So just kind of line the box up with the edges, and so obviously I need more resolution in my geometry in order to make more happen here. So as you start to run out, which obviously is pretty quick when you're just using a box, you'll go up here to Edit Mesh and Insert Edge Loop. And I'm not going to go through a bunch of hotkeys and stuff like that. You know, this is pretty much my workflow right here. There's plenty of more efficient ways to do it, but you know, this is how I'm working. Okay, so what I'm looking for here is I'm adding edge loops at points of change. I'm putting one here because you can see the geometry of the weapon is sloping down. So I'm going to need to pull this out. So I'm just adding in a few little pieces here, not too much. And you can see I'm only moving things along the X and Y planes because I'm not worried about the depth of the weapon right now. I'm not worried about all of that just yet. I'm just trying to get the profile shaped correctly. And like right here, you know, the image itself might not have the weapon perfectly level, but it might be nice to keep these vertices level. So I'm selecting all the vertices behind there, so I don't want to just click because then I'll only get the front ones. So select all the vertices in the line, and then I'm going to hold V down, V, which is, you know, V as in vector, Victor. And while I'm holding that, you can see this turns into a little circle here. So, and then I'm going to just do this, and it's snapping to a vertex. And so I'm snapping to a line here. I want to hover my mouse over while I'm holding V to snap to this. And that's just going to make those, you know, perfectly aligned. So I'm just going to go ahead and come in here and sort of align some of this stuff a little bit better while I'm in here. And so I'm just going to keep doing this process until I get the profile kind of shaped out how I want it. And so you can just kind of watch how that's going to happen, because I get distracted when I'm focused on modeling it. I just want to get the shape out pretty good. like I said, you know, there's so many different ways to model this stuff. It's really just your preference and taking your time and figuring out what works best for you. So we have like a little curve here. So I'm just gonna bring some more edge loops. And I just like to grab the vertices here and vertexes, whatever you prefer, and bring it down. I think I'm gonna just kind of snap these just because I want them all level. I want that curve in there. And, you know, we're not worried about getting everything perfect yet. Just want to get the basic sort of shape going here. And if I come out of my front view and look here, you can see how the shape is coming along in 3 dimensions. And it's looking fine, you know. It's obviously it's really rough. It's just the shape, the outer shape kind of profile thing going on here. But that's okay, you know, that's fine. That's where you want to start. You want basic, good shape. So from here, we're just going to kind of continue on this path until we reach a point where we need to start, you know, softening edges and adding in more detail. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep working for a little while, and you guys can kind of watch that. I don't know if I'm going to maybe speed that up when I show you in the video, just so you don't have to sit through it all in real time. But here what I'm doing is I'm selecting the faces, and I want just the face on the end because I'm going to extrude out. So I'm deselecting these ones here. So I actually have just this face on the end selected, which you can see up here. So just so that nobody's confused about that. So I'm going to extrude out, and I'm going to stop here, even though I could extrude all the way back, because you know, I'm going to want a handle to maybe come down here. So just constantly be thinking about, you know, where you're placing things and why you're doing it. You know, you want to be thinking about what you're going to be doing in the future, but you also, you know, don't want to get too bogged down by details yet. So, you know, don't worry if everything's not perfect. You can always change things up later. So, I think what I'm actually going to do is select these faces here. Well, I think I'll just go ahead and extrude those down as well. And you might be saying, you know, well, hey dude, there's a big hole right there in the middle. What are you going to do about that? Well, I'm going to cut that out when it's time to cut that out, but it would be so much more work to try and work that into the design right now. I feel, you know, that's my personal view on it. You can disagree, and you're welcome to have at that right now if you want to, but I personally am not going to concern myself with the big hole just yet, because I don't think it's an issue. And so we're just kind of shaping this out. You know, sometimes you just have to sit back and kind of take a look at it and say, Okay, well, what do I want to do with this now? Where am I going with it? You know, take it slow. Don't feel like you have to rush it out. I usually spend maybe as much as, you know, 6 or 7 hours modeling a detailed weapon. Um, Another thing to take note of is here on the side, you see all this stuff building up, this list. Um, and I also haven't saved in a while, which isn't good. You should save often. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this. This is history. I'm going to go edit, delete by type, history. And now that list is gone. I don't have to worry about all that nonsense that I don't need getting in my save file. And I'm going to save my scene. Now, right now, I'm saving scene 1. So I just saved scene 1. But I like to have backups in case I make a mistake or I need to go back or a file gets corrupted. So I'm going to also save out, I'm going to save out the scene again, but this time I'm going to call it scene 02. And there are ways to set this up so that it'll automatically save, you know, in steps, but I just do it manually. It's habit. I think it's a good habit. So this is what we have so far. Doesn't look too much like a gun, but we're getting there. So there's a whole number of things that we can still work on here. Maybe we want to work on this hole. Maybe we'll just go ahead and knock that out while things are pretty simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert an edge loop, and maybe one more here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shape these inner pieces here to give me, you know, that whole shape. And as I'm doing it, I'm seeing that they're really, you know, I need a little bit more to get that how I want it. And I can't. Sometimes it is a little difficult to see these things through the X-ray, so, you know, sometimes you actually have to just kind of step away and look at it, or have the image. You know, sometimes I like to bring up the reference image and just kind of look at it to make sure that I'm getting the stuff correct, and look at little details and things that I can't see as good on here. So that's a good thing to do as well. I'm noticing that this shape is a little bit more teardrop in circle, so we'll kind of do this. Okay, so the shape's not perfect. That's fine. We're just going to take these faces in here, and you can see that I'm selecting in this view, but I'm also getting the ones on the other side. You want to be careful, make sure that you're getting both sides. And I'm going to delete those. Okay, so now I have a big hole in my mesh. You can see there's kind of, you know, I can see the insides. Obviously, that's not what we want. But there's an easy way to fix that. So just take this entire edge thing here. You know, what I did was I just double-clicked one of the edges to select the edge loop. And since this is a nice loop here, it's nice and clean, I can get the whole thing. And you may or may not know this, but you can extrude edges. So, you know, I'm just going to hit extrude up here, and it brings up this, you know, the typical extrude out whatever thing. I like to actually go ahead and hit W and just go back to my move tool, and then that way I know it's moving, you know, in actual world space and not in some weird direction. And I'm going to hold V again. I'm going to snap to this back side here. I'm snapping to the matching, you know, pair of edges and stuff on the back side here. Now, this isn't done. We have what looks like a sealed hole, but in reality, if I hit 3 and go to my smooth preview, you can see how the edges is not right. You know, it's not smooth. This side's smooth, and that's because the vertices here are actually not merged. If I grab one of these edges, you can see that they're not welded together. Now you could manually weld them, or you could you know, merge them. However, But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select these vertices in this area. You could just select the whole model if you wanted to. And then you just go to Merge over here under Edit Mesh. And I have this set a certain way. When you open this up, the threshold is 0.001. And what that's saying is that basically this is the distance that it's allowed to merge. If I had this at 1, then it could merge everything that's 1 unit away. But that would merge things we don't want. We only want to merge the vertices that are right on top of each other. So I'm keeping that as 001 in my option settings. So I'll hit merge, and that's going to go ahead and do it. And it's going to add it to my history over here under inputs. And you could also change that here. This distance right here is threshold. So you could manually change that over here. But I change it in the options because I like it set that way pretty much all the time. And now when I hit 3, you can see that when it smooths it, those are actually merged together. And it looks good. So that's fine. And we have a hole now. And it's, obviously we're still going to put in some work there later on, but we're just still getting everything kind of roughed out. And so let's take a look here and see what else we've got that we want to change up. Okay, so we need a trigger guard, and it's a piece of this geometry. It's all kind of one solid stock, so I'm going to go ahead and make that as well. And there's plenty of approaches for that, but the main thing is you want to kind of keep the quads if you can, and keep a good edge flow. So we're going to go ahead and insert a couple edge loops. I'm going to insert one here, and I'm going to insert one over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go to Create up top here. And I'm going to go to CV Curve Tool. Now if you don't have this set to 3D Cubic right here under the Options Tool Settings, you want it set to 3 cubic. So because that's going to give you a smooth curve. So CV Curve Tool, click that, and you get this little kind of crosshairs thing. And just outside that face, I'm going to click, 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 and you need at least 4 points to get that curve going. And I'm just going to bring it right up to about where the other one is. It doesn't have to be perfect. When you're done, you just hit enter, and there's your curve. You can right click it and click Control Vertex, and just kind of adjust those if you want. Just kind of fine tune them a little bit. And I don't want them to go into the faces. So see how there's a gap? You want that gap. And you want this to kind of be in the center of that. So you could actually turn on so that you can see the edges if you want. And I went from left to right. It's kind of important to note the direction of your curve that you make it in for the next step. And you want to make sure that your curve is in the center of your object. Now I'm working here with the center being, that 0x line there, that 0z line, excuse me. And I've also got this is created right on that 0 curve, so I'm already good to go there. If you don't know where I'm going with this, this is a really great and useful tool. So I select my object, and I go into Faces. I'm selecting this face here. It's right here. And then I'm going to holding Shift, and select my curve. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes it won't let you select that curve when you're doing Shift. So what you have to do is you select the face, and then you hold Shift, and you right-click and go to Object. I don't know, it's not doing it right now, so we're not going to worry about it. But anyway, sometimes you have to go back into Object mode to select the curve. But you just want to have this face and this curve selected. And then you go and you hit your Extrude button, And see how it's kind of shot it right out to the end of that curve there? Well, what it's actually doing is extruding along the curve. And if we go to our channel box here, you can see now that we have this poly extrude face, this in our history. That's the extrusion that we just did. And if you go down till you find this one named divisions, you just click that, and then click and drag your middle mouse in the area, the work area, to add some divisions. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so now we have, sorry, a little interruption there, but we have created an extrusion along the curve, which gives us just an easy, kind of curve. It's along the shape that we wanted. Obviously, we'll still adjust it some, but it's a nice little quick way of doing it. And then at this point, I want to delete my history because I don't want that curve attached to anything anymore. And I'll also select that curve in there. Oops. See, I didn't delete the history from the curve, so I'm going to delete all the history. There we go. And we can delete that curve from out of there because I don't need it anymore. I'm going to take this face and delete that. I'm also going to take this face and I'm going to delete it because that's where I want to connect. Now here, I go into vertex mode. I'm going to get my merge vertex tool. And I'm going to click these ends and just they snap and merge right to where I want them. So just click and drag to the point you want to merge to. Make sure it matches. And if I hit 3, you can see they're connected. And now that's all squared away. All I have to do is come in here and readjust some of these so that they are where I want them to be. And just like that, I've got a pretty good trigger guard modeled out. And, it's still rough. It's going to need adjusting. It's not the final. Don't worry about that. We're a long ways from done. But, now there's a trigger guard. So it's something to work with later. It's the base. We're sketching out the base of object. I mean, there's different things that we could work on, but I think I'm going to go ahead and make the barrel just because it's really easy and it'll help give us a sense of how wide the gun needs to be, because a lot of people make their weapon models either too thin or too fat, and a really good way to figure out how wide it needs to be when you don't have maybe all of the references that you should have, or a lot of different angles of the weapon, you can kind of base it off of the barrel. So I'm just going to make a cylinder. You could use a tube if you wanted to, but just a little bit more complicated than is necessary. And if you're trying to do a low polygon, you don't want too many in there, you could reduce the cylinder to less. I think this is a default of like 20 faces around. But I'm just going to pull out a cylinder here to begin with, and I am going to make it into a tube. You can see how it's not matching up with our reference perfectly, but that's okay. We just want the length of it, and you want to make sure that the width of it is pretty much the same. So then I'm going to come over here into perspective, and I do want to make it have and inside, because it's just going to make it more believable. So I'm extruding it, but then I'm scaling it inward. So I'll make it pretty thick out there. You don't want it to be too skinny. And then I'm going to extrude it and just push it back, straight back. You don't have to go all the way back with it if you don't want to. You know, because generally you're going to see it from an angle like this. You're not going to be looking straight down the barrel. And even if you do, you might texture that so that it's black in there. Depending on, you know, your needs. I'm not really doing this for anything other than to have a model to render. So I'm not too worried about poly counts and all that. But I'm just going to set it back in there. And what you want to do when you're trying to make a model look realistic, or maybe not photorealistic, but you want it to be more believable. Obviously, you don't want these real hard edges. I mean, looking at that edge, it's too crisp. In reality, even sharp edges are rarely going to be that sharp. So generally I render in mental ray, and I just kind of smooth everything and render it that way. But in order to keep this edge, I'm putting an edge loop on either side of the edge that I want. So you can see I just put two edge loops. I put one on the outside on here, and one on the outside over here. And when I smooth it, it'll keep an edge, but it'll soften it a lot. And so I'm going to do that also on the interior here. And I'm going to put one kind of down in there, back there, so that doesn't pop out. And then also I'm going to put one on this end. And I'll probably just put like another one just kind of like in here, maybe down here as well, just to keep it a little smoother. You can see sometimes you get this like pinching on the ends, which is just because this face here is not, you know, it's attached to all these other things. It's not a quad. So if you want to fix that, you just extrude that face and then scale it in. And you can see now that it's not so much of an issue. So then I'll just kind of like leave that smoothed. It looks decent, you know, the edges are still crisp, but they're not perfect. I might actually, just looking at it, I want to put another one right here, because otherwise it'll pull it too much and it's just not quite right. So okay, so that's looking pretty good, and now we have a width, you know, to our gun. We can compare to up here. You know, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing that this is probably going to be a little bit wider, maybe something like that, based on looking at this black part right here. I don't know if you can see that good, but see how the barrel's going into it, and then there's obviously going to be some width there, and then this is also further widened from that. So there's going to be some width there, and I may even adjust that a little bit later on, but for now, that's looking pretty good to me. So making a barrel is pretty much one of the simplest parts of modeling a gun. I think we'll go ahead and just kind of rough out maybe some of this area as well. And basically when you're breaking down a gun, pieces that are, anything that looks like it could be a separate piece, that's something you're going to probably model as a separate piece, at least initially. If you want to connect it later, you can. You know, maybe sometimes it's easier to break up a big piece like this stock. I could have possibly broken it up, but it's all kind of like one giant molded piece. So we'll go back into our side view here, and I'm going to model, I guess, the receiver up in this area. So, well, we'll start to model it anyway. I don't know how far we'll get. Here I'm just kind of making a general square, general purpose cube. Edit mesh, insert edge loop here. Probably put something here. Sometimes it helps to just bring up your reference and kind of have a look at it and see what it is that you want to do. So we have some sort of a rail up here for the sights, and this is essentially just a cube with sort of a hard tapered edge here. So we'll kind of make this square and then probably extrude out to this corner here, and keep that relatively hard, and then maybe extrude from along here up and out. Now if you've never really modeled any of these kind of weapons before or anything, you might want to take a look at some different angles of, like, say, these rails for the sights and stuff like that. I've modeled quite a few weapons, so I'm kind of able to guess at how that looks from other angles. But you know, so I'm kind of rethinking how I'm doing this, and I want to take a slightly different approach. So I'm just actually going to go ahead and do that again. And you can notice that I'm going into our previous piece, and that's not a problem. You know, don't be afraid to have pieces going inside of other pieces, as long as they're not setting on the exact point, you know, on top of each other, so that, like, you know, you don't want one face to be sitting right where another face is. Like if I got these really close together so that this face was sitting on this face, that would render probably weird. So you wouldn't want to do that, but I know that this is going to be hidden. It's going to be inside of there, and it's going to be wide enough to accommodate this barrel here. So you can see it's not wide enough yet, so I'm just going to widen it out to about here, maybe a little bit wider, right there. Okay, so it's sitting inside of there. It's nice and clean. We don't have to worry about modeling all that down below because it's just going to sit inside of there nice and neat. And so now I'm going to take, let's take a look at this. Okay, so I'm going to take this face and this face, and we're going to extrude them. Oops, hold on, I made a mistake there. I'm going to extrude those, and I'm pulling out this blue one here, which is going to make it go straight out away from the face. And so you can see the one on the side there is going out as well. One thing you'll notice, though, if you're getting close here, see how this one's coming out farther, and down here as well is coming out farther than the corner. That's to do with just how it's extruding out and away. But it's easy to fix. You just grab these corners here, and see, I'm going to snap it to that. I'm going to, you know, again holding V and snapping to this vertex just to make sure that that is aligned, and also here I'm going to do that. So now it's nice and even all the way around, and I'm going to grab the edges here and here. You could grab the faces, it doesn't matter. I'm going to suck it in a little bit. You know, again, looking at our reference, you can see how that gets kind of sucked in there, and I'm thinking that that's probably plenty. And then, you know, so we've got a real simple shape here, but we're starting to get what we want. I'm going to go ahead and insert an edge loop here, and I'm aligning it such that this corner here is matching up, these vertices are matching up with this background corner, because I know that I want to extrude up a segment here, and so I've made it so that I can do that all in one shot. So now I'll just grab that face, and there's a lot of this switching back and forth. I mean, you know, it depends on how you work, but I switch between perspective and the side angle a lot initially. And so I'm pulling straight up here, and I think that I'm going to go about yay high, because again the model is not, the reference isn't perfectly straight, so I'm kind of, you know, you could turn it, rotate it a little bit, but you know, we're not going for perfection here. This is just believability. And so you can see there's all those little rail things up top there that you could potentially, you know, cut edges in, and for each one of these you could, you know, create an edge, create an edge, create an edge, create an edge, and extrude out. But it's just kind of inefficient, kind of not how you would want to do it. The other thing is, this probably needs to be widened out a little bit, like so. Something like that would probably be good. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just put in another little thing here by extruding out, because I want kind of a little lip there. And I mean, that's kind of getting into a little bit of detail. We'll go ahead and put these little rail things on here. I don't know what to call them, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and make a little square. Just, that's a default 1 by 1. I'm going to size it about what I want. Make it a little taller. And coming up here, well, first let's move it up. So I like to get things aligned pretty good. I'm going to hold down D. Okay, so I'm holding down D, and you can see how this changes. Here, you see how the little arrows go away. And what I'm doing is I'm changing my pivot. I'm moving the pivot of this square. So I'm holding D, but then I'm going to also, while I'm holding D, hold down V for that snap. So I can snap to vertex and move it straight down, and I'm snapping to a line. So now you can see my pivot point is aligned to the bottom of this box shape. I can hold V again. I'm going to snap to the top of here. So now the bottom of this shape is perfectly aligned with this. If I pull it out over here, you know, this is one little trick to save you that one polygon. You can delete that because we're not going to see it. You know, it's not necessarily something you would need to do, depending on what your end goal is. So then I'm going to just kind of scale this in. I'm just eyeballing it right now. But I might want to take these, and again, you can snap, you know, in perspective view. So I'm just snapping again these to match this edge. So sometimes you'll see it freak out like that. You just have to really put your mouse over the vertex you want to match. So in this corner here, let go, okay. And then I know that these have a shape sort of like in, maybe not even that much, maybe there. And here, what I can do is take this. Okay, so this is the first one here. It's kind of aligned. What I'm going to do is I want them all to be equally spaced. So I'm going to do a duplicate with a transform. So what I'm doing is I'm holding Shift and then I'm pressing D, and it's duplicated it now, but it's duplicated in place. I'm going to move it over to match where I want it. So I'm matching this one down here. Okay, and now when I hit Shift D again, see how it moves it over that equal amount? I'm just going to do that again, again, and again, and again, and again. And they're not matching down here perfectly, but I'm not worried about that because it's still going to be believable, and it's going to look fine. So I'm not going to worry about perfection per se. I'm going to pull out this last one down here. Again, just matching up the end there. I'm going to do one little one here, just kind of manually moving it over. And matching the end here as well. And it looks like there's a little lip there, so I'm just going to pull that way a little bit. So now, in just a few little steps, we have, sort of this rail system up here. It looks, it looks pretty cool. It's definitely a good little start point. So that's good to go. Everything's kind of starting to match up. You might have a little bit of an issue when we want to smooth this part out because these are so perfectly matched. It might not sit quite right, and we'll have to adjust that later, but we'll see how it goes. I don't know. I haven't decided if that's something I need to worry about or not. But you always just come back to stuff and change it if it doesn't work out. So the next thing we'll do is maybe cut in this little cylinder here, for the ejection port. So let me go ahead and save real quick because I haven't saved in a while. So I'm just going to save this one out as Scene 03, and I'm going to insert an edge loop here, insert an edge loop here. I'm going to put one here, and I'm going to put one in about here, and about here maybe, because I want to sort of match this curvature a little bit. There's like a little curve over here. You can see it better here. There's a little, just an ever so slight little curve. There's one on that side too. And it's good to add in just those little bits. It makes it that much more believable. And so you can see here it's not it's not anything special is going on, but I'm just going to grab these faces and let me look at my reference again. It looks like I need to put maybe one in about here. So I'm going to grab these faces, and this is one where it's only going to be the one side. So on the other side, even though I've made the same cuts, I'm not going to do this part except on the right side, because there's only one ejection port here. There's going to be an ejection port on the right side. So I'm going to extrude, and this one I'm going to just push this little blue part in, and you have a few different options here, because you can push this in, and you can try and make this into the cylinder, the bolt that's going in here, and you can see the bolt there, that silver part. Or you can kind of push this back in there, and you can delete that And I might want to adjust some of that. I don't know if I want to adjust anything just yet. And so when you've deleted that, you could potentially make an interior here. You could make like a little area inside for the chamber if you wanted to like show the chamber being opened and like putting bullets in there and stuff like that. I am not going to go into that on this particular design. I don't feel like it's necessary for. I'll pull that over because I don't like how that's looking. Yeah, I just don't feel like it's necessary for purposes for this particular one. It's always something you could come back and do later, or you know, if you wanted to just make a new one at a later time, and I say go for it. But I'm not going to worry about it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a regular, plain old, boring cylinder. Put it in here, and shrink it down, bring it along, and I'm going to just kind of look at it over here. I'm just going to eyeball it, and bring it this way. Maybe I will scale it a little bit. And just push it back. So now it's like we have, you know, that bolt in there, and we have an injection port, and I use a similar technique, like what we did with the barrel, as far as refining the edges so they're not so sharp. And this is one of the reasons you want to try and keep quads as much as you can, because you can just pop these edge loops in wherever you feel like. So I'm going to put one around there, and I'm going to put one here, and I'm going to put one here, and here. And the closer you put it, the sharper the edge is going to be. So like the closer I put it, I always put one on either side of the actual edge, because the actual edge is going to be the part that's going to serve as the edge being smoothed. And then like up top here is what I was talking about. It might not match up after we do this, so we'll see. I'm going to put one really close. I'm actually going to put two because I want it to be nice and sharp. Now this can add to your poly count. It can start getting significant if you do a lot of this. So it's not really a technique that I would always recommend for people trying to do low poly stuff. You know, our count's not too high right now. We're only at 414. Well, that's what's on the screen. Let's zoom out. That's actually not accurate. We're at 784, but we've got a long ways to go, and nothing's really smoothed out. So we'll see how that goes. And then so, like when I smooth it, I can see certain areas are just not as sharp as I would like yet. Okay, so we're getting a little bit crisper there. Put one there. Let's put one up front for sure. Maybe two. See, sometimes you have these faces where I can cut one in here if I want to, but I don't always like to cut these end faces. So, okay, so that's looking pretty good. You can see it's nice and sharp. It's got sharp edges, but they're still smooth. They're sharp and smooth, which it makes it feel more realistic, especially when you're rendering at the end. And it gives you more realism when you don't have textures, especially. Obviously this ejection port isn't working though. You know, you can see here how it's becoming overly smooth. So I think that I think that that's because there's nothing here. I need one there, and I need one here. Okay. It's looking better. There's a slight, I don't know if you can even notice this or not, but you can see there's a slight little kind of a pull here. See how that's kind of pulling, and you can see it just ever so slightly, sort of a little bit of a shading, smoothing error. And I think that just adding in some more geometry will help with that. So that's pretty good. Pretty good. If we zoom out, you can see it's looking decent. I don't know if. Let me look at this real quick. It looks like this part could probably be flatter. Right here, I might have kind of cut this wrong, so it could probably be back in there more, and I could sort of flatten this whole thing. Sort of needs to come in maybe to go with how this looks. See how it's more flat in that area, it's pushed in deeper. So that's something that I can either fix, or I can just decide, you know, hey, I'm gonna take a little bit of liberty with that and leave it. And you know, I think that I'm gonna end up just kind of leaving it, because I'm not overly concerned. You know, it looks fairly good. And we'll probably do more with this. I still have to add in the little arm here, the little bolt lever. And then I think we'll probably come back to the main body, try and shape some of that out a little bit, smooth it up, maybe add in this end piece and you know, the padding, and we'll just kind of go from there. But I'm gonna wrap it up for this little section here, and I'll probably come back and do some more of that in a little bit. So don't forget to save your work if you're working along, and you know, save it off in copies, and we'll come back to it. So that's that.